Welcome to this webinar. Great to see so many people are joining. So my name is Isabel. I'm a marine biologist and I work in Ocean Citizen. My colleague Clara is a co-host on this session and will moderate, make sure everything goes smoothly. This session is being recorded and it will be made available after the webinar. So, as you might know, this webinar is part of a mini-series called Understanding Blue Forests, and it's the first episode today. Sergio Rossi is our presenter, host speaker today. He's also the project coordinator, and he will introduce marine forests of the world today to you, making it accessible for, well, all audiences. And we hope you dive into it with as much pleasure as we do. Just gonna wait a minute, see if some more people connect. The chat will remain open through the whole session, so you do not hesitate to type in there. Although if you have questions, please try and keep them in the Q&A section. That will help us quite a lot to handle the questions, and we'll get back to it at the end of the presentation. So the structure for today will be me giving the floor to Sergio in just a minute. And so he can introduce the marine forests of the world. And at the end of the presentation, you will be offered participating to a quiz, just to check, to review the concepts that we'll cover right now. And at the end, we will jump to the Q&A, okay? So I think we can start.
Okay.
Sergio, whenever you're ready.
Okay, I'm ready. No problem.
Yeah.
With that. So hello everybody. Good afternoon. For all of them that all the people that is in the Brussels zone. Okay, on the also the United Kingdom zone. It's afternoon now. And my name is Sergio Rossi. I'm associate professor at the University of Salento. And I will try to introduce you this concept of marine forests in general, also making a little bit more about the marine animal forest. I will explain a little bit more what does it mean. We all know in some way that we are here. We are in a big mess that we did with our own hands, in which there are planetary boundaries that have been completely surpassed, some of them. Some of them are in the limit. From the 7 that were at the beginning, now we have 9. From these 9, it is considered by several studies that we passed just 7 of them. That is about contamination, pollution, is about ocean acidification, climate change, soil use, the hydrological stress, and many others that are here listed. So in some way, part of the direct impact that we have as humans in general, so we have also indirect impacts as also as the providers of some really deep perturbations to the system. And whenever we are talking about where we are, if we are in the oops or in the fuck, hopefully in the oops, okay, but climate change, it is important to understand that we have to be proactive and we have to make things just ameliorate our situation and give a choice, not only to the planet, but especially to our own survivorship as a civilization or civilizations. It's better to say it in this way, as human civilizations, because we indeed are now in a big trouble. So to solve this, we have to look for allies. We have to look for those mechanisms that give us the opportunity to maintain the functionality of the world system, the world biosphere. And then we can just go to all the organisms that facilitate our lives. These guys are architects and engineers, okay? That, as you may know, they construct buildings, they construct bridges, they construct hospitals, roads, and they facilitate our life in many ways, okay? So these organisms facilitate the life of other organisms. This is a tree, okay? And it's called ecosystem engineer organism because it facilitates the life of many others, of the birds, of the mammals, of the insects, of course, but many other organisms are depending on the shelter, on the productivity, on the structure, on the food that these organisms can give them. You know very well, this kind of organisms make forest. But the forests are not only, on land. The forests are also in the oceans. In the oceans, we have huge forests, okay? But the problem probably is that we don't see them. There are two kinds of forest. One is the vegetal forest, for example, seagrasses, Oceanic and Mediterranean, or Zostera nolti, or Thymodontia, which are phanerogams that just return to the sea, and they grow in salt bottoms, giving huge quantity of possibilities to other organisms. There are also other forests, which are, for example, the kelp forest, in this case, the seaweeds, okay, in many places of the planet. They need light and they need nutrients to just go on. But there is not the only kind of forest that is just present. There are also others that is called animal forest, okay? So the animal forest is this, and this is the formal way to just explain what is an animal forest. This living three-dimensional structure, three-dimensional, of course, because as you may understand, they are massive, they are arborescent, they may be, making rugosities, okay, similar to a vegetation forest, but composed basically by sponges, cnidarians, bryozoans, ascidians, and other sessile organisms in the ocean benthos. You know that all these are animals. And the most probably famous forest all over the world is this one. It's coral reef. Coral reef is a forest, is a basically marine animal forest that is, composed by scleractinians. And these scleractinians is huge, their power, because they are symbiotic with small microalgae, and this small microalgae feed them. So it's a perfect symbiosis in which they just build up bioconstructions in all the tropical and subtropical areas. However, these are distributed basically from 0 to 15, 20 meters depth, or also in the mesophotic. We will talk just in a couple of minutes. But it's not the only marine animal forest that there are. Most of the marine animal forests, in fact, are between 15 and 1,500 meters. Because most of the marine animal forests, okay, are composed by all these organisms that feed on the particles that are suspended in the water column. What is particles? Particles, yes, which particles? Well, basically phytoplankton, which are microalgae, zooplankton, these small crustaceans, mostly composed by copepods, which is a nice name, is these small crustaceans that are probably the metazoan, the more abundant metazoan all over the world, okay? And also the tritus and other components that are suspended in the water column and that feed these organisms. So this is the huge biome that is populating the Earth. Take into account that most of the Earth is, of course, occupied by the oceans, and the floor of the ocean is highly populated by this marine animal forest. Of course, we don't have to, forget the vegetal forests that are in the surface, but if you take into account this huge component of depth, you will find that most of the benthos, most of the soils of the ocean are marine animal forests when they are present, of course. And guys, they are marvelous. These allies, and we will say they are allies, okay, are from these mussel beds, which can be, instead of forest, can be called as shrubs, okay? This tropical Gorgonian forest, okay? These mesophotic forests that are below 50 meters depth still have something to do with light, and they have still symbiodinaceae inside, and they can just still have this possibility to harvest light. But most of them, are in deep waters like this, for example. This is in Greenland, this is in the Arctic. These are this huge and marvelous sponge browns in Antarctica, 400 meters depth. These are primitive gorgonians also in Antarctica, just making us to understand how huge is the capability to adapt these organisms. And we have also the coralligen, in the Mediterranean Sea, as well as, for example, Corallium rubrum. This is also another forest that if you leave them just to grow, is a really, really nice forest in the sea. Not only, but especially the salt-bottom forests were present all over the world. Now, wipe out by bottom trawling, we have to say that these forests are much more scarcer now because of the direct impact of this kind of industrial fisheries. And of course, don't forget the deep water corals forests, which are 500 meters depth, 1,000 meters depth, and are there especially in sea mountains and in submarine canyons, very deep and always just depending on these particles that are falling apart, are falling down from the surface. Okay, what happens with all these forests? Which is the rule of these forests? Why I call them allies? Well, partly because many of them just avoid the huge energy associated with hurricanes, associated with storms, associated with cyclones. I mean, it's not only the mangrove, but also forests like Posidonia oceanica, when it is the surface areas, or also coral reefs, act as barriers. They also are, habitat for the early life stages. So these kinds of nursery grounds, it's called nursery grounds, where many organisms, live in the shelter, trying to take advantage of the food that is provided, but also of the hiding places in which they can just stay. They are also, attractors of a lot of agile fauna like fishes, many kind of fishes, crustaceans, and of course, mollusks and echinoderms are living there and are providers of food also for us. They also transport the hydrodynamics, capturing particles, for example. Posidonia oceanica is capable to capture sand that then will just fuel all beaches, okay? And they are hotspots of biodiversity, because as you may understand, this dimensional structure, like the forest that you know in your vicinity, in the neighborhood, these forests are just having a lot of organisms that are just living there because of their complexity. They act also as nutrient cycling, organisms. They just obtain a lot of the particles and a lot of the nutrients, and they can transform them, very easily. And also, as a curiosity, if you want, they are in some way, attractive for the tourists, especially the coral reefs and the coralligene that can be in the diving. And last but not least, they act as coral immobilizers, can just make the possibility to immobilize the carbon that is around them. So in the case of the coral reefs, because they are capable to just fix the carbon that is dissolved in the water. And in the case of the animal forests, which are just feeding on particles, because they take the phytoplankton directly or indirectly in their, they capture this phytoplankton, they filter this phytoplankton, and they can just make this possible. So, what we do have here, okay, an ally that is vanishing. This ally is vanishing, okay, because of the direct and indirect impact. This Daniel Pauly, that talk was very interesting, and it's based on the paper he wrote in 1999. And this paper talks about the simplification of the systems. What you see here is how all the long-lived organisms, like, for example, tuna, sharks, big fishes are disappearing, but also how the three-dimensional alive structures are also just vanishing in some way. So are vanishing also the kelp forest, are vanishing also the coral reefs, and vanishing also the cold water corals, vanishing also the coralligene assemblages because of the direct and indirect impacts. Which are these direct and indirect impacts? Indirect impacts is basically climate change. You know that climate change is affecting the organism in many ways, especially the increase of temperature is stressing the organism and making these heat waves that killed not only the coral reefs, but also reefs in many other places of the world. Just give it a few examples. In places in which the temperature was low, the temperature was considered, really controlled. 2.5 years ago, there was a shift in temperature which killed a lot of the organisms that were there in the Vancouver, for example, and also in Washington, the state of Washington, in the Pacific coast. So organisms reached in the intertidal more than 50 degrees centigrade, 50 degrees centigrade, okay? In the Mediterranean Sea, this year, the first 5 meters, we reached in June, 31 degrees centigrade. So organisms that are used to have lower temperatures are exposed to these huge temperatures. Also, acidification is impacting these three-dimensional life structures, and of course, the direct impacts. The direct impacts, as for example, as I said, bottom trawling, excess of sedimentation, mining, the deep sea mining will just have but will have much more during the next years, unfortunately, huge impacts on these organisms. Also, the pollution and overfishing is just the overfishing in an indirect way, in the sense that we've been out, for example, taking out of the system sharks, groupers, and other big animals. This, is just changing, transforming deeply the trophic chains. And these trophic chains, deeply transformed, are just, not function well, and then other organisms take advantage, more opportunistic organisms take advantage, and they may transform. Alien species also are impacting deeply this forest of the sea, both the vegetal forest and the animal forest. So, what can we do? Ocean Citizen Project is how we should regenerate this kind of ecosystem functioning, which is the way to just make this kind of regeneration. Okay, we are huge consortium, okay, which there are not only academic, academic partners, but also NGOs and small medium enterprises working all together here. Okay, you see the different partners that are just coordinating a very nice way to make common protocols in which we try to make a regeneration of the overall functioning. So making restoration of the different habitats that are interconnected between them. So seagrasses, seaweeds, also sponge grounds, Gorgonian forest, all them just trying to make this kind of, a synergy of habitats, making a set of different kind of methodologies to make it real, to make it, possible. And we are doing in 5 different ecozones. Why we are doing that in 5 different ecozones? Well, we're doing this kind of effort in 5 different areas because we want to demonstrate that our protocol can be exported, is not only being successful in, for example, a warm temperate sea like the Mediterranean Sea, but also in tropical seas, the Atlantic, the Baltic, or the Arctic. This is the meaning of having this kind of comparisons. It's very important to understand that comparing this system and using the same or very similar protocols, but adapted to the different environmental and biological conditions is the key for a successful program in this way, okay? So, what are we doing? Well, the first thing that you have to take into account that any kind of protocol in general has to have these 6 different, let us say, these 6 different targets. The first has to be verifiable. So you can verify from outside if your protocol is working or not. It has to be quantifiable, measurable. So that it means that is not qualitative or semi-qualitative, but any kind of information that you take from the system, from this progressive system, which you are making this kind of regeneration program, has to be really quantifiable. The third is that has to be permanent, in the sense that once you make this kind of gardening, once you have you make this kind of transplantation protocols, regeneration protocols, this kind of adding complexity to the system in the good way, adding these three-dimensional life structures, has to be permanent, and additive. What it means, additive? Additive, and this is the key point, is just considering, for example, a conservation zone, a Natura 2000 zone, place in which you add to the system the possibility to function better, to accelerate the process in some way of the regeneration. This is a thing that has to be controversial in the sense that when Europe made this program in general, not only the Ocean Citizen program, but other programs, many other programs, the restoration part and the rewilding, okay, is just on the focus also of the people that want to conserve. There is people that want only to make conservation, which is good. There is no problem at all with that. But we understand that things are going so fast and we have the grades so widely, all the systems, that it's very difficult to recover the system in a natural way at the human scale. And this is very important to understand. Of course, the system will just recover in 1,000 or 3,000 years or 10,000 years. I perfectly understand that, but we don't have so much time. Scalable, yes, scalable means that once you have made the pilot, you can make an upscaling. So you can just make this much more, you can pass from, for example, 10,000 meter squares, an hectare, to many hectares, making a reality, the connectivity, the inter-exchange, the exchange between the systems and between the habitats, the fluxes of energy and so on, in a real way, in a way in which nature really works. Unaffordable, that's the last one in which we have to take or to have to pay attention. Affordable means that anything, any kind of place can apply the project. And these are, the things that we have to, or we want to, enhance. First is the biodiversity, and its ecosystem functioning, as I told you. The other is the carbon immobilization. So these are allies in the sense that they take carbon, and then if you make vast areas in which you have forest, you can have kind of carbon immobilization at a large scale, okay, as a climate change mitigator. And of course, associated to that, food sustainability, blue growth, and circular economy, because as we will see just in a couple of minutes also, this is also benefiting, for example, aquaculture is benefiting also in the case of Ocean Citizen, local fishermen is indeed benefiting also, for example, other kind of thing, like for example, leisure, scuba divers. So how we do that? The first is study the restoration area. Here you have a couple of examples. An ROV, remote operated vehicles, so ROVs that are going down to 80 meters depth, 70 meters depth, 50 meters depth, 30 meters depth, to make transects and then to look at what happens in the area at the moment in which we want to make this kind of restoration program. But studying also many other things, like for example, biodiversity, studying the carbon stock, studying what is the connectivity of the system with other systems, studying also the genetic variability, studying also the environmental variables. So, for example, abiotic variables like oxygen, like temperature, salinity, the light, and also biotic variables like zooplankton, phytoplankton, the microbial loop, and so on and so on. Once you have clear what you can do, then you apply it. And you start applying in which you make a long-term monitoring. So the most important thing here is that you have the cues to make a long-term monitoring. Mix it, in this case, with the help not only of the public funding, which normally is intermittent, we know very well, but also the private funding, which mix it all together, make possible that this can be done during decades. And it's important, the monitoring during decades, to look what happens in the area that you are to be restored. Okay, then active gardening with several species, selecting the species that can be in some way good representatives of those species that will be able potentially to survive to climate change and to ocean acidification. So selecting also the species that indeed are prone to and ready to really be front this kind of changes, which are a reality and we cannot avoid them. And also make it not only for animals, but also for seagrasses and seaweeds. This is also very important. Again, regeneration is the connection between the habitats. So it's not only restore one system. You don't restore only coral reef. You don't only restore seagrasses. You don't only restore seagrasses. Seaweeds. But you restore everything to just interconnect the points. Okay? Then you enhance carbon immobilization because you are making possible that these organisms carbon in their structures, and that's very important. Okay, and look for emblematic species in the area. Just recover some emblematic species and the functionality linked with the trophic webs. That's also very important. In some cases, you can also make specific programs for vulnerable species, like in this case, red coral. You can do that, and you can try to restore coral in places where it has been disappeared. Is a possibility, or enhance the population that are really, in danger. But not only that, in our program, we are combining integrated multi-trophic aquaculture of what we call the low energy organisms, like, for example, suspension feeding organisms and macroalgae. How? Well, in this case, what we are doing next to the fish cages that are already present in some places, we are just cultivating polychaetes, we are cultivating sponges, we are cultivating corals, we are cultivating gorgonians. That will grow and will be the part, but will be, the seed, if you want, for part of this kind of regeneration, restoration programs. Okay, so this is also very important. Take it to advantage of this. And on the other side, also, if you are doing this kind of activity, make sure that you also, for example, cultivate bivalves and other organisms that can be food, algae, macroalgae, for example, that can be food or can be used for the human activities and human economy. And don't forget, in some way, that when you are restoring the different habitats and your regeneration of the functionality, what you indeed really do also is make, viable for the local populations to have, for example, much more biomass in terms of fishes, in terms of crustaceans, echinoderms, or for example, mollusks. So this is also part of the program in which you are just try to be sure that you can do that, and the fish much more of what they take. So it's exactly the same as we are making in a marine protected area, in which you are enhancing this kind of fisheries in the outside part of the marine protected area. So inside is enhancing a little bit more this possibility toward this kind of spillover of different organisms that can just close their life cycles inside the restoration area. So we are quite sure that we can just make a protocol that will be easily to export. So not only to Europe, but also beyond. What we are just trying to do is be, on the hotspot of this kind of restoration programs. Now, there are many of them along Europe with European projects like Ocean Citizen, Horizon projects. We want to just put our brick in this, in this structure of rewilding and regenerate the system, okay, with a common protocol that more than probably will be, easy to see the results in the next couple of years. If you have questions, I'm open to all of you. And now, Isabel, if you want, we can just put here the QR code. I just put it here.
Yes, exactly. Thank you so much, Sergio. So indeed, if you have any questions, you can shoot them in the Q&A. We'll get back to that in just a few minutes. So as it is quite a fair amount of information, we've prepared a little quiz. You can access the quiz through the link in the chat or by scanning the QR code that Sergio is sharing. And let me just, one moment here, so I will be sharing my screen so that you can, wait, I have to do that in order. All right. Sorry, so I'm taking the spotlight, Sergio.
Okay, so I just stopped sharing.
Just for, it's okay, I just took over. So now you should be able to see live the questions and the responses that attendees are giving. So which of the following ecosystems are considered marine forests? And we have 4 possible answers. Rocky reefs and other seafloors, sponges, corals, seaweed, and seagrasses seem to be the favorites of the audience. Deep hydrothermal vents, polar ice shelves. I think some of you are still answering. Sergio, feel free to comment on the questions and the answers that the audience is giving. I mean, you're the expert after all. All right, great. It is indeed sponges, corals, seaweed, and seagrasses. So marine forests can be vegetal, can be animal, and they come under a wide variety of form, shapes, and colors. Next question. What is the ecological role of those marine forests? And watch out, because there are multiple answers in this one. So do they produce fresh water for coastal communities? Do they provide shade for the coral reef? Do they offer habitat, food, nursery grounds for marine species, or do they regulate the climate? Marine forests. Yeah, that's quite a fair amount of answer. Remember, you can give multiple answers. Great. So we have a tendency for selecting the third answer. So marine forests do offer habitat, food, nursery grounds for marine species. Some species will shelter or seek shelter in the marine forest, and other will establish their nursery grounds. Other will seek food. Other will just get all the advantage from the marine forest, right? And marine forests indeed also play a huge role in climate regulation.
Well, this is I think that was a tricky, question, because in fact the climate regulation, guys, is provided basically by the ocean currents. Okay, this is what indeed is making the possible that we have the climate that we have, even if the climate is an ice age or the climate is as we have now, quite mild. However, it's a tricky question in the sense that it's much more climate mitigation in some way. However, I have to also to say that it's exactly that as the land forest. You need huge quantities of this forest. This is why it's so important to preserve and to regenerate this forest to really have the possibility to a little bit to mitigate what are we doing.
Exactly. This is actually in the next episode, because this is part of a series. In the next episode, we will dive deeper into the concepts of blue carbon and how marine forests, thanks to their role in capturing and storing blue carbon, how do they bring resilience to the ecosystems and in the long run help regulate, mitigate climate change. All right, so next question. Marine forests contribute to climate regulation, or in this case, if we want to be even more exact, mitigation, mainly by which of these 4 processes? I think I just gave it away a second ago. So, do the marine forests reflect sunlight away from the ocean? Do they absorb and store carbon dioxide, known as blue carbon? Do they produce aerosols that cool the atmosphere, or do they consume oxygen during photosynthesis? So yeah, indeed, marine forests do absorb and store carbon dioxide, known as blue carbon. Do you want to add something on that, Sergio? The carbon I
Well,
heard.
indeed,
Yeah.
is the only answer in the sense that it's kind of climate mitigation. Again, it's very important to understand that these organisms take, some of them take this carbon and stock it for decades, hundreds of years, thousands of years, and in some cases, like these Caractinian structures, may immobilize the carbon for hundreds of thousands of years or even more. So they generally stock and they help us, stocking this carbon, immobilizing this carbon in the long term.
Back. Yeah. So now to the next, which of the following pressures most threaten marine forests globally? So we have for candidates, climate change, pollution, overfishing would be the first answer. Second answer, deforestation and inland mining, or noise pollution and space debris, or finally increased salinity from desalination plants. And that one might be quite obvious maybe, but indeed it is climate change, pollution, and overfishing, the main pressure that threatens marine forests at a global scale. And this will be the last one. So why is restoring marine forests important for coastal communities? I'll leave you to it. Does it improve ecotourism, fisheries, and coastal protection? Does it reduce the need for artificial seawalls? Does it help rebuild ecosystems that support livelihoods and resilience? Or is it just so magical that it does all of the above? All the above or to the left? So for this question, we have more diversified answers. Do you want to comment on that, Sergio, and wrap it up? This was the last question. So we have some people selecting all of the answers are correct.
I mean, indeed, because again, if you have a coral reef and you have the reef fringe, this kind of, this bioconstruction there, you will have, of course, a huge change in the energy transmitted by, for example, a hurricane. Let me explain one example that was published a few years ago. They demonstrated that more than 90% of the wave action and the energy the energy that is just transmitted in a hurricane was absorbed by living coral reefs. This is also important, by living coral reefs. They are damaged. I mean, when there is a huge hurricane, there is a problem there. But the coast may, in some way, this kind of three-dimensional life structures can minimize the impact in many places. If you don't have coral reefs, you will have also problems about that. And this is the same with Posidonia oceanica, but the problem is that Posidonia oceanica has disappeared in many places, especially in very shallow areas. So Posidonia oceanica was present at practically 0 meters depth. So in shallow areas, you found this kind of meadows. By they disappear, and they were capable to absorb this, this impact. And this also give me the possibility to answer one question of Davide Barotto, who said, you said that the blue forests have also a role in transforming hydrogens. Could you explain it again? Yes. It's one of the most important things to understand because it's exactly as, to make a comparison, is very similar to a land forest, okay? Imagine that you're outside of a forest, of a pine forest, for example, and there is a windy day. This windy day makes you that there is a lot of wind there, and you start going inside the forest. When you are inside the forest, you will find that the wind is heavily diminished. So there is a slowing, of the wind inside because of the three-dimensional structure. So the fluid, in this case, the air, okay, is in some way intercepted by the forest. Exactly the same happens with a coral reef or a Posidonia oceanica or a seagrass or a kelp forest. You have these currents, and these currents intercept the fluid, in this case, the water masses. And this is also important because in the case, for example, of the animals which have polyps or have structures to filter, they will just take advantage of this interception. They will intercept particles much more efficiently if they make a forest, because there will be just a turbulence inside the forest that will retain particles and nutrients much more, in a much more optimized way.
Thank you for
I don't know
that,
if you have
Sergio.
more.
Exactly, I was going to say, you can just shoot your questions in the Q&A section. We still have a couple of minutes. Or if there's maybe any mention that Sergio did to other research group that you might want to know more about, just ask and we can type that in the Q&A or in the chat. I've shared also a link to the TED Talk that you mentioned, Sergio.
Sorry, I lost your
I shared the
last
link.
2 words.
Sorry, I shared the link in the chat to Daniel Pauli's TED Talk.
Yeah,
So
it's
this
a
is what I'm
fantastic
referring
one.
to. If the audience wants to have other resources that you mentioned, you can just ask and we'll share the links or names or whatever.
This guy is very good. You just listen to him because he's an expert in fisheries, working among other things for the FAO. Okay, and he has got brilliant ideas about that, and he's fighting against these non-regulated, these non-responsible, let us say, fisheries all over the world, and not and try to make things in the best way to stop some of the practices that we are doing all around the world, and that are also affecting the marine forest, by the way.
All right. So you may not have questions right now, but we remain available. If you want to reach out to Ocean Citizen, you can either check the website. I'm going to share it now in the chat. That's quite easy, oceancitizen.eu. You can also reach out by email if you have a specific question, and we will make sure the right person replies depending on the type of question that you have. So here it is, info@oceancitizen.eu. Well, if there is no questions left for today, I will leave you with that, and also close with this note. So remember, this webinar was part of a 3 episodes mini-series called Understanding Blue Forests. And on 27th of November, which is in 2 weeks, we will have episode 2, focusing on blue carbon and ecosystem resilience, presented by Enrique Isla and Juan Uso. They're both researchers at the ICMSSIC, which is, how do I call that in English? This is the Spanish Scientific Research Center. Would that be correct in English?
Yeah, that's it. Yes.
Blue carbon and ecosystem resilience. So I'm just dropping the link in the chat in case you want to sign up to that one as well. Feel free to share with anyone you think might be interested in that topic. So how can we join the Ocean Citizen movement? Well, I would say you can stay up to date through the website. Whenever there's events like this webinar, we'll be sharing it also on social media, but it will be first posted on the Ocean Citizen website. And then I see your name on Teams is UK Lions, so I'm assuming you might be based in the UK. The project unfolds in 5 different ecozones, and those are the Canary Islands, yeah, UK, exactly. Canary Islands, the Mediterranean, Spain in the Mediterranean, and then we have another ecozone in the Red Sea, in Norway, in Denmark. So if you're close to one of this area, you might get in touch and ask directly if there is local activities. For now on, for example, in Tenerife, it's mostly visiting schools and explaining with different words as those we use today what are the marine forests. But it depends on the site, frankly. If you want to have updates on what's happening across all sites, then definitely keep an eye on the website and the social media. Thank you, Limara. Okay, so I think that will be it for today. Thank you all for joining once more. The recording will be uploaded to the website and you will be notified when that's done. So if any friend of yours missed the live session, do not worry, they can check it later. All right.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
For inviting me. Indeed, Isabel, thank you.
Great. All right, ciao.
Ciao, ciao.